Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Texas, in Kansas, our brethren in Georgia, in Missouri, in Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, in Africa, Kenya, Pakistan, to the United Kingdom, and also to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 47, the subject, the chronological order of events, and upon the special request of our beloved brother Steve and sister Corinne, and to the rest of the brethren. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. Now, let us continue concerning the first judicial session and the second judicial session. So I would like to read again tract number 15 on page 67, saying, "The truth, therefore, is trouble-free. Between the judgment of the dead and the judgment of the living stands the half-hour silence. The time absorbed in bringing the first judicial session to a close and preparing for the second session." Tract 15, page 67. So, when the first judicial session is closed, meaning the entire proceedings that pertains to the dead is finished, before the second session, the second judicial session in the most holy place will begin, there must be half-hour silence. According to that reading, in tract number 15 on page 67. Now let us compare the entire Shepherd's Rod publications. Now I would like to place here first the statement in tract 1567. So we have half-hour silence. Half-hour silence. The dividing line when the first judicial session is closed, according to the reading. And then before the second judicial session commences, there must be half-hour silence. And here, second judicial session. So that is the statement in tract number 15, page 67. That between the judgment of the dead, the first judicial session, when it is closed, stands the half-hour silence as the dividing line between the proceedings of the first judicial session. We know that this is most holy place. So this is most holy place. It is the half-hour silence. Now, as I've said, in studying the Shepherd's Rod publications, according to answerer number 3, page 41, let us always remember the inviolable rule of interpretation is that we need to harmonize the entire Shepherd's Rod publications, all related statements. Of course, the term related statements must be answerer number 3, page 41. Let us remember the inviolable rule of interpretation. Now, when we will be talking about related statements, it can be easily understood that it must be pointing to the judgment and as well as the half-hour silence. We already explained on our episode number 46 that not all fulfillment of Ezekiel 9, there is half-hour silence. Let us distinctly separate the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9 by which there is no half-hour silence and the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9 by which there is a half-hour silence. Or the half-hour silence itself is called the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. According to our reading in the Old Codes, to Symbolic Code 5 and 6, page 10. So, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9, by which there is a half-hour silence, indicates that there is a judgment that is close. And since there are only two judgments, the judgment that pertains to the dead and the judgment that pertains to the living. So, when the judgment that pertains to the dead is closed, there is half-hour silence. Before the proceedings, the judgment that pertains to the living. Both in the holy place and in the most holy place. In the most holy place, it is called judicial session. Whereas in the holy place, it is called judicial sitting. Now, for example, in tract number 15, on page 29, it says, so in the great day of final atonement and investigative judgment, the judgment of the first two sittings, the time to separate the tares from the wheat, the bad fish from the good, from among both the dead and the living. So there are two judicial sittings. Although the Jefferson says that there are three, but the third one is during millennium. So the first two judicial sittings, it is to separate the tares from the wheat, meaning to blot out the names of the wicked among the congregation of the righteous, both to the dead and to the living. So, there is no other feast by which the judgment in the heavenly sanctuary will close. It must be on the Day of Atonement. So let us distinctly separate the half-hour silence that will occur on the Day of Atonement and the half-hour silence that will occur on the Passover week. And God being God of order, not the author of confusion, according to 1 Corinthians 14, 33 and 34. The half-hour silence that pertains to the Day of Atonement, brothers and sisters, that is the only half-hour silence by which you can use the term, the judgment is closed. because there is no judgment that will close on the Passover week. And that is why there is a statement that on the Passover week, the judgment adjourns, not close, meaning it is just suspended because it is still unfinished. And we can check that very important truths by the judicial demonstrations. Because its judicial demonstrations, there are different insignia. I would like to show to you our little diagram concerning judicial demonstrations. So let us show to them that diagram. The judicial demonstrations, 181. And I do not know if we have sent this diagram to Brother Steve. So those diagrams that we did not as yet send, take a note so that we could send. So this is the judicial demonstrations. Brothers and sisters, if you will carefully read the shepherd's rod, the arrangement in its passages is not the same. Why? Because to let us know that there are different proceedings. If you will read track 1564 in the second paragraph, the arrangement is thunderings, lightnings, voices. But in the Bible, the arrangement is lightnings, thunderings, voices. This one could not be reverse order here. Neither this one is reverse order, but disarranged. Brothers and sisters, here the first one is thunderings, but here thunderings is number 2. Because in the statement of the shepherd's rod, reverse order, the middle part always remain as it is. Only the first and the last that had been interchanged. Because that is logical. For example, this one, if I would reverse this one, so the middle part always remain as is, only the upper portion and here that changes the position. So that what the shepherd's rod teaches us. Although we will read it one by one, but I'm trying to show to you that its judicial proceedings is not the same. Here it says lightnings, thunderings, voices. But the voices here is celestial voices. If it is celestial voices, then that is the voices of the angels. But here the voices is the voices of the 24 elders and the 4 beasts, and they were not celestial beings. They were human being. And also here, the arrangement is not the same. You see? Voices, thunderings, lightnings. Reverse order of this one. You see? Voices, thunderings, lightnings. This one is lightnings, thunderings, voices. But here the statement is adjourned. So let us distinctly separate the statement when it says adjourned and the statement when it is saying close. So I would like to gradually explain now this very important subject, brothers and sisters. So let us focus our attention to the first judicial session and the first judicial sitting. Let us focus first to the first judicial sitting. Now let us read tract number 15. Tract number 15. So it says here, the statement given by the shepherd's rod. Tract number 15 on page 17. Clearly then, Daniel saw only one judicial sitting, but made mention of it twice. First, in connection with the describing what he saw in vision, and second, in connection with obtaining the angel's interpretation of the vision. Now, to distinctly separate the judicial session, let us read tract 15, page 15. The student of advancing truth will also note that Daniel refers to but one judicial session, although he does make mention of the judgment twice. First in verse 10 of chapter 7, and second in verse 22. So, I would like to show to you, brothers and sisters, concerning the judicial session, there is only one judicial session that was shown by God to Daniel. But Daniel made mention of it twice. The first mention is Daniel 7 verse 10. Then the second mention is Daniel 7 verse 22. So we can easily understand that the judicial setting, I would like to put here, holy place, holy place. The first mention is covered from Daniel 7, from verse 1 up to verse 14. And the second mention is from Daniel 7, verse 19 to verse 27. But the second mention of the judicial sitting is divided into two. Daniel 7, verse 19 to 22 is the understanding of Daniel on the first explanation made by Angel Gabriel. Daniel 7, verse 16 and 17. Daniel 7, 16 and 17, and let us read the Bible. Daniel chapter 7, verse 17 and 18. Now, let us analyze closely the entire chapter of Daniel 7. So, according to the shepherd's rod, I would like to read tract number 15, page 15. It says, the first 14 verses, so Daniel 7, verse 1 to 14, Daniel describes all he saw while in vision. So, what is that? That is the first judicial sitting. Let us read page 17. Track 15, page 17. Clearly then Daniel saw only one judicial sitting, but made mention of it twice. So, the first mention is in connection with describing what he saw in vision. So that is verse 1 to verse 14, according to here in track 15, page 15. Let us read again. In the first 14 verses, Daniel described all he saw while in vision. What is the first judicial setting? The first mention, it says, in connection with describing what he saw in vision. Track 15:17. And that is the first 14 verses on Daniel 7. So Daniel 7 verse 1 to 14. That is called the first mention of the first judicial setting, because the first judicial sitting, Daniel mentioned it twice. And then it says, let's continue in page 15. And in verse 15, he explains how grieved and troubled he became after considering the damaging work which the fourth beast did. Then in verse 16, he tells that he approached the angel who stood by and requested his interpretation of the things seen. In compliance with this request, the angel answered. So verse 15 is the verse by which Daniel expressed how grieved and troubled he became concerning the damaging work of the exceeding great horn. And because of that, in verse 16, he came to angel Gabriel to explain. And angel Gabriel explained in verses 17 and 18. But according to the shepherd's rod, in the next paragraph, it says, this exceedingly brief interpretation did not satisfy Daniel, and being particularly interested to know in detail the things described in verses 7 to 14. So, verse 1 to 6 is no longer considered. It is concerning 7 to 14. The truth concerning the judgment, as well as concerning the beast and its little horn, that had the eyes of men and a mouth speaking great things, Daniel requested further elucidation. Again, of necessity, mentioning the judgment, accordingly, the angel readily explained, confining his interpretation strictly to the fourth beast symbolization and to the judgment. So, verse 19, verse 20, verse 21, verse 22, and or 19, 20, 21, and 22, these four verses is the second mention but in the first judicial sitting. But in these four verses, 19, 20, 21, and 22, Daniel include what he understand on the first explanation of angel Gabriel. But at the same time, there is a request, because according to the shepherd's rod, Daniel was not satisfied. So while giving some understanding he obtained from the first explanation of angel Gabriel, at the same time, he attached questions. But no longer concerning the first, second, and third beast, confining only to the fourth beast as well as the judgment. And the explanation of Angel Gabriel is found on verse 23 to verse 27. So that is the second explanation of Angel Gabriel, because the first explanation is 17 and 18. But after the explanation of Angel Gabriel, on verse 28, Daniel declared that whatever he understood in the second explanation of Angel Gabriel, he kept it in his heart. But he did not fully understand all. Although Daniel has understanding on the second explanation of Gabriel, but he did not mention it. He just kept it in his heart. But whatever the thing that he kept in his heart, still that understanding of Daniel is not sufficient. There are many things that Daniel did not understand. So I would like now to gradually explain Daniel chapter 7. The whole chapter of Daniel 7 is divided by the shepherd's rod, judicial session, and judicial sitting. Or in other words, the entire chapter of Daniel chapter 7 is pointing to the proceedings in the most holy place and the holy place. And the proceedings that pertains to the most holy place is only verse 10 and verse 22. As stated in track 15 page 15. The first mention is verse 10 and the second mention is verse 22. So there are more verses in the judicial sitting rather than in the judicial session. Why? Because the focal point is concerning the exceeding great horn. The judicial session is pointing to the proceedings in the most holy place, indicating that the daily and the sanctuary had been successfully trodden underfoot by the exceeding great horn, while Jesus Christ was still in the holy place. While the ministration of Jesus Christ was still in the holy place. But when Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place, the statement used by the shepherd's rod, the exceeding great horn lost control of the daily and the sanctuary. I would like to read that statement. 2SR 139. So let us read 2SR 139. It says, furthermore, the papal power treads God's truth on the ground up to the termination of the prophetic 1,260 years and ended with the imprisonment of the Pope in 1798. But the sanctuary and the daily were held to the ground by the great horn up to 1844. So only up to 1844, the exceeding great horn had been able to successfully to held into the ground the truth expressed by the daily and the sanctuary up to 1844. And then it says, at that time, in October 22, 1844, he lost control of them. What does it mean that he lost control of them? He could no longer darken the understanding of God's people. He could no longer hide Christ's ministration in the most holy place, or he could no longer hide the mediatorial work of Jesus Christ in the heavenly sanctuary. So it says, at that time he lost control of them, and the power of the three angels' message raised the truth from the ground or from underfoot and place it in the church. So in this reading, we can understand that the three angels' messages was not proclaimed not until up to 1844. So it is only in October 22, 1844. So the statement in 1 SR 116 saying that from 1844, brothers and sisters. Now here's another statement that I would like to read to you. I think track number 3, 115. And I think that is, let me see. I think that is supplement. Track, or third edition. It is called track number 3, third edition. Page 115. So, let us read the statement. In track number 3, 115, it says, I would like to read. Track number 3, third edition, 115. There is not, moreover, either scripture or church history to show that the judgment began in or before John's time. And still further, as the first angel's message was never preached before 1844. So I would like to read again. And still further, as the first angel's message was never preached before 1844. Then when the judgment hour came, this angel's message, the message concerning the judgment, went forth. So, that is very plain in this reading. Now, I would like to continue reading. It says, the investigative judgment being in two sections, the first devoted to the dead, and second to the living. The fact is evidence that though the first, the second, and the third angel's message, Revelation 14, 6 to 12, apply directly to the period of the judgment of the living, they must also, though indirectly, apply to the period of the judgment of the dead. In this relation only, except as a warning of coming events, have they been preached since 1844. When, therefore, the judgment of the living commences, and the image of the beast is fully made up, then these messages are, with a loud cry, to be repeated as present truth concerning the living instead of the dead. Do not forget the statement says that when the judgment of the living commences, and the image of the beast is fully made up. So, when the proclamation of the third angel's message, or the commencement of the judgment of the living, at that time, the image of the beast is fully made up. So, let us go back to our investigation, brothers and sisters. I would like to read verse track 15. Track number 15, page 13. It says, both seers, that is John and Daniel, both seers distinctly declare that the event which they saw was the judgment. The difference between the two scenes is that Daniel was led to look into the sanctuary while preparations were being made for the judgment to convene, whereas John was led to look into the sanctuary after the judgment had been set up. In fact, John not only saw the judgment in progress, but he saw the whole proceeding from start to finish. Now, let us now compare the two prophets. Daniel, the only vision that was shown by God to Daniel is the proceedings that pertaining to the dead. Or in other words, the entire book of Daniel is pertaining only to the first 6 seals. Because that is the judgment that pertains to the dead. But concerning the 7th seal, concerning the judgment that pertains to the living, the only portion that was shown by God to Daniel is at the time when the second judicial session in the most holy place is being prepared according to the voice of inspiration. But when the judicial proceedings that pertains to the living in the most holy place commence, Daniel no longer saw it. Only the preparations. That is the only portion of the judgment that pertains to the living that was shown by God to Daniel, according to tract 15, page 13. But John the Beloved, he saw the entire proceedings, both to the dead and to the living, from start to finish. But let us consider first the book of Daniel, by which the book of Daniel is only pertaining to the proceedings that concern the dead. Although he had been given the privilege to see concerning the proceedings that pertains to the living, but only the preparation, while the preparations were being made, and not the time when the judicial proceedings in the most holy place began to commence. So in what verse in Daniel 7 that we can say that that is the preparation of the second judicial session in the most holy place, by which, according to tract 15, page 67, there is a half-hour silence while the preparations were being made. So, that is the portion that was shown by God to Daniel. Now, let us read tract number 15. In tract number 15, so let us read again the statement. On page 19, it says, pages 18 and 19. Tract 15, pages 18 and 19. Although the proceedings of the first 2 sessions are somewhat different, they are in all other respects similar. The third, however, is entirely unlike the first 2. The difference are seen in that before the half-hour silence occurs, there is at the throne a sea of glass like unto crystal. Revelation 4:6. And no one stands on it. But after the half-hour silence passes away, the scene changes. The sea of glass is mingled with fire. And them that gotten the victory over the beast and over his image and over his mark and over the number of his name stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. Revelation 15, verse 2. Then the next paragraph it says, in other words, at the first judicial sitting, there is no one standing on the sea of glass.
and the sea itself is like unto crystal, while at the second sitting, the sea appears like unto a fiery stream, and the saints stand on it. So, let us make a little illustration. So let's make a little illustration, brothers and sisters, in this statement given by the shepherd's rod. Track 15. Now, track 15, pages 18 and page 19. So this is the most holy place, October 22, 1844. And this is first judicial session. First judicial session. Then here, I would like to put here. The statement says, on the first judicial sitting, so that is pointing to the holy place, October 22, 1844. So this is the first judicial sitting. Of course, the first judicial sitting must end on October 10, Day of Atonement. Now, on the first judicial sitting, it describes the most holy place. The first judicial session. It says, the sea of glass is clear as crystal. Clear as crystal. But it says, but after the first judicial sitting, the sea of glass, clear as crystal, changes. It is mingled with fire. It says, mingled with fire. Remember, brethren, the statement declared clearly that God showed to Daniel the preparations of the second judicial session. And that preparation of the second judicial session commences after the first judicial sitting. Not after the first judicial session. Because, of course, while the first judicial session is about finished, it needs to prepare the place by which the proceedings that pertains to the living is to convene. Or in other words, the place by which the proceedings that pertains to the dead had been convened is not the same place by which the judicial proceedings of the second judicial session concerning the living is not the same place, but the same sanctuary, most holy place. Or the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary, it is a big one. Now, for example, this is the most holy place. So, it is divided into two place. This place is for the proceedings to the dead, and this place is for the proceedings to the living. But this is entire most holy place. So, when the proceedings of the first judicial session that pertains to the dead is about finished, then the place by which the proceedings that pertains to the living is to convene is now being prepared. And that is the only portion that was given by God to Daniel concerning the second judicial session. Daniel had been able to see the place as well as the preparation, when the preparation is being made. But at the time when the judicial proceedings in the most holy place, in the second judicial session commenced, Daniel have not been able to see it, or God did not show it to Daniel, according to the Shepherd's Rod publications. So, now let us continue our investigation, brothers and sisters. Now, we can easily discern that when the first judicial sitting is finished, so this is October 22, 1844, first judicial sitting. Then, since we already studied this in our many episodes, it was completely finished in October 10, 2021. But this is Bible calendar. But in Gregorian calendar, it is April 1, 2020. Which is recorded in Ezekiel 45 verse 18. So, after this proceedings in the holy place is closed, we already explained that according to the vision of Ezekiel, Jesus Christ visits the earth. What is the purpose? To give message to Ezekiel. And after the message was given to Ezekiel, Jesus Christ returned to the heavenly sanctuary and still in the holy place. So, the half-hour silence here is Christ's visitation on the earth. Christ's visitation on the earth to give message to Ezekiel. Now, brothers and sisters, according to the voice of inspiration, October 22, 1844, let us put here April 1, 2020. So, the statement, the sea of glass, clear as crystal, when the first judicial sitting is finished, the scene changes. Brothers and sisters, the scene changes. What happened? The sea of glass, clear as crystal, it was mingled with fire. It was mingled with fire. So that is the first changes. Brothers and sisters. Now, when the blotting out of names in the holy place is finished, That is March 27, 2021. The last and the final day of atonement. Blotting out of names of all the wicked among the congregation of the living. Again, after the half-hour silence, the scene changes again. The sea of glass, clear as crystal, which mingled with fire, became fiery stream. And this is Daniel 7, verse 10. Daniel 7 verse 10, by which God showed to Daniel the preparation is being made for the second judicial session. Therefore, when after the half-hour silence, when the most holy place become fiery stream, the judgment that pertains to the dead did not as yet close. Because that is still in under the first judicial session. Because this is the first mention of the first judicial session. Because the commencement of the second judicial session, Daniel had no longer been able to see it. But he had been able to see while the preparations were being made. So we can understand that the preparations of the second judicial session are being made while the judgment in the most holy place that pertains to the dead is about finished, but not yet finished. When the judgment that pertains to the dead is finished, then, brothers and sisters, there is another half-hour silence, then commence the second judicial session. And that is the reason why, in order for us to understand that there are different half-hour silence, God gave different arrangement of the judicial demonstrations. Different insignia. Not the same. So we have the half-hour silence here in the holy place. Then, the scene changes. The sea of glass, clear as crystal, mingled with fire. Then we have another half-hour silence in March 27, 2021. The scene changes. The sea of glass mingled with, the sea of glass clear as crystal mingled with fire become fiery stream. Then, on the next half-hour silence, brothers and sisters, that is already the boundary line of the first judicial session close, and then commence the second judicial session that pertains to the living. And that is the part that we need to study closely. When would that be, brothers and sisters? The second judicial session. Now, let us read. Another statement in the shepherd's rod. But I would like to show to you this diagram, brothers and sisters, maybe to let us understand concerning this very important event, right?
because through the chart, it will helps our understanding, brothers and sisters. So let us go to the diagram concerning 214, concerning Ezekiel 9. Now, Ezekiel 9. Now let us gradually decipher this diagram because we place the statement itself to help us understand. Now, for example, this one. So we already explained this. 1SR 116. Why would God make a double prophecy for the same thing? So, what is that double prophecy? Of course, that is pointing to the 430 years. The 430 years in Ezekiel 4 and the 430 years in Genesis 15, 13, and 14. On the next sentence, it says, the prophecy by Ezekiel gives the information in detail from the beginning of Luther's Reformation to Ezekiel 9, marking of the 144,000 and unrolling of the scroll. So, this sentence reveals great truth. Very deep, brothers and sisters. Now let us, I would like to read first 2TG. Uh, 39. Let me see if I could find that statement. Where B.T. Hotep mentioned. So let us read 2TG 39. Page, I think page 11 or page 12. It says, Ezekiel was to lie down on his right side, not only for the iniquity of the house of Israel, but also for the iniquity of the house of Judah, and thus bear their iniquity too for 40 years. So both houses, the whole Christendom, are given the chance, the same opportunity. The one comes first in time and the other last. 390 years of grace are given to the former and 40 years to the latter. A total of 430 years. During this period of time, they are to triumph over sin and at last attain righteousness by faith and be rewarded with the righteousness of Christ. So here, brothers and sisters, the voice of inspiration divided the 430 years into two. 390 and 40. The 430 years in Ezekiel 4. But the 430 years in Genesis 15 and 13 and 14 is 30 plus 400 or 400 plus 30. Let us read the statement in 1SR. It says here, let's read 1SR page 114. So, let's read the statement.
1SR page 114. So the prophecy to Abraham was made in two sections. So the prophecy to Abraham was made in two sections. First being 400 years and then to 430 years. So it says, Ezekiel's prophecy is made exactly the same way in two sections, but not the same number of years in each section. But how about the 430 years to Abraham? Is it the same number of years? Brothers and sisters, no, it is not the same number of years because 30 plus 400. But why is it the shepherd that says not the same number of years? Ezekiel's prophecy. It says Ezekiel's prophecy is made exactly the same way in two sections, but not the same number of years in each section. Or in other words, first the shepherd is explaining that the 490 years in Ezekiel chapter 4 could not be the 490 years in Genesis 15, 13, and 14. Why? Because it is not the same number of years. Genesis 15, 13, and 14, the division is 30 plus 400. Whereas Ezekiel 4, the division is 390 plus 40. So it says, Ezekiel's prophecy is made exactly the same way. So the same way, 430 years in two sections, but not the same number of years in each section. Instead of 400 years, we have 390 years. And instead of 30 years, we have 40. Making the same total of 430 in each case. If this prophecy had a reference to the prophecy made to Abraham, there should have been the same number of years in each section. But since it is not the same, it must be another period of time. So, it says it must be another period of time. So let us distinctly separate the 430 years in Genesis 15, 13, and 14 and the 430 years in Ezekiel chapter 4. If you will read 1SR 116, it says, I would like to read the statement. The typical 430 years prophesied to Abraham began in the true our time with Martin Luther. As explained on pages 108 to 111, therefore both prophecies, the one to Abraham and the one to Ezekiel, refer to the same period in our time. You see, brothers and sisters, it says, there are two prophecies, the one to Abraham and the one to Ezekiel, by which both of them is referring to the same period in our time. In our time, pointing to 1844, it says, the one to Abraham stands as a type, but the other is a direct prophecy, and both run parallel in our time. So, hoping that God would help us in this very important subject, brothers and sisters. The 430 years that was given by God to Abraham in Genesis 15 verse 13 and 14, and the 430 years in Ezekiel chapter 4. What is the 430 years in Ezekiel 4 according to 1SR 116? Direct prophecy. What is the 430 years to Abraham? Typological prophecy. Now, I would like to read 2SR 275 again. 2SR page 275. It says, you will also note on page 222 that the 430 prophetic years originally applied to Abraham and his seed overlap the 430 of Ezekiel chapter 4. The 430 years of Ezekiel should terminate in 1929 or 1930. But the perfect fulfillment of the prophetic period of Abraham in its antitype is yet in the future, going out of Egypt. Yet in the future, going out of Egypt. And then it says, Ezekiel's prophecy is intended to point forward to the announcement of the predicted reformation and the one through Abraham to its completion, Ezekiel 9. Now let us read again the statement in 2SR 275. Ezekiel's prophecy is intended, so that is the focal point of the prophecy, which is a direct prophecy. The statement direct prophecy pointing directly to the predicted reformation. And if you will read 2TG, B.T. Hotep called it the final effort of revival and reformation. I would like to read 2TG 39. Let's read. 2TG 39 on page 13 and 14, 2TG 39. Then Ezekiel arises, 2TG 39, I think page 13 and page 14. Then Ezekiel arises and is made the watchman. Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word at my mouth, and give them warning from me. And since this prophecy is now unfolded for the first time, Ezekiel obviously is especially figurative of this final effort of revival and reformation. 2TG number 12 on page 13 or page 13 and 14. So it says, the direct fulfillment of the vision of Ezekiel is pointing to the final effort of revival and reformation. And everybody, I think, would agree that such final effort of revival and reformation did not occur in the days of B.T. Hotep. So it is very important to study this prophecy, brothers and sisters, the 430 years. Because it is closely connected with that final effort of revival and reformation, by which the Shepherd's Rod says, in 1TG number 41, page 29, it says, this chapter of Isaiah the prophet is indeed to bring revival and reformation, such as has never taken place since the beginning of sin. God forbid that any one of us should miss the experience and the blessings that come through this revival and reformation. So it says, pointing to the final effort of revival and reformation, that God forbid that any one of us should miss the experience of this predicted final effort of revival and reformation. But the shepherds rod declared in 1 TG 8:24, it says, who is to bring this revival and reformation? This great change, the branch. And according to Isaiah 11 verse 1 to 5, the branch is the Lord, the Son of David. Therefore, we can easily understand that the prophecy of Ezekiel is pointing to the visitation of Jesus Christ. Because it is Jesus Christ who will bring that final effort in revival and reformation. So what does it mean that none of us should miss the experience of the blessings and the joy of that revival and reformation? It is pointing, brethren, to all of them whose names had been left written in the Lamb's Book of Life. To repeat again, that vision in Revelation 7, I think verse 3 and 4, that the angel is waving something up and down in his hands. That scroll is the names of the 144,000 living saints whose names had been left written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Why is it that God showed to Ezekiel twice that visitation, or the shepherds had called it the Dardaniels of the Bible? First, logically, brothers and sisters, it points out first to Beti-Hotep, the antitypical Ezekiel. How many years that God showed the vision to Ezekiel? 25 years. And would you think it is just a mere happenstance that God also raised up Beti-Hotep as his servant for 25 years? 1930 to 1955. How many years when God lead his people under the leadership of Joshua, the second section of Exodus? 25 years. Very plain in the Bible. Beti-Hotep, being antitypical Joshua, also lead God's people for 25 years. But that is not the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy. So I would like to remind again, brothers and sisters, let us show to them that chart concerning 40 and 25. And we will continue to our next episode. So, why is the you have a hard time to find that? We already shown that several times. That diagram. 40 and 25. $216. Now, so if you will look at this diagram, brothers and sisters, 1491 BC, supposed to be, there must be BC here. 1491 BC, then 1451 BC. That is the first section of the Exodus under the leadership of Moses. And the shepherds had called it righteousness by grace, 40 years. And the antitype is from 1890 to 1930. Righteousness by grace, 40 years. Right, brothers and sisters? Now, here, brothers and sisters, from 1451 BC to 1426 BC, that is the entire period of the second section of the first Exodus under the leadership of Joshua, 25 years. Beti-Hotep also from 1930 to 1955, that is 25 years. But whether you believe it or not, the truth will still forever remain that in 1955, the organization had been fallen again from grace. Therefore, God gave them another righteousness by grace 40 years, 1955 to 1995. And it is also perfectly corroborating to the last 40 years of the life of Moses when they were eating manna in the wilderness for 40 years. It cannot be applied here because here God's people is fasting. Fasting and eating is not the same. What is 40 years here? It is direct prophecy. Ezekiel 4. This one, it is typological prophecy. The last 40 years of the life of Moses, righteousness by grace, God's people eating manna. What is the manna? The truth that had been given by God to Beti-Hotep. Therefore, from 1955 to 1995, there is no prophetic event that God would send new revelation. In this study, the same with the statement given by the shepherd's rod that any message that had been discovered within the spirit of time, it must not be of God. It cannot be of God. Because God decreed that within 40 years, God will not send any new message. The same here, brothers and sisters, from the time Beti-Hotep died, 1955 to 1995, God did not send any new message. And it is duplicating the experience of ancient Israel that they were eating the same food for 40 years, manna. And that is the message of Brother Hotep. So the faithful obedience must be those brothers and sisters who stick only to the message that was given by God to Beti-Hotep. But those brethren that had been misled by such imposters saying that they have new truth, of course, it is only pointing to the unfaithful obedience. The faithful obedience stick only to the message that was given by God to Beti-Hotep. Because that is the divine decree. Within 40 years, there will be no new message. Eating manna every day, the same food, meaning the same truth. But in 1996, brothers and sisters, the same situation. When does Sister White died? I would like to show to you. 1915. 1915. Then 1930. So 15 years. These 15 years, in reality, brothers and sisters, is pointing to from 1996, when the 40 years of grace had been ended, there must be 15 years. We called it detoxifying. 1996 plus, I would like to, 1996 plus 15 equals 2011. So, why is it that they need to detoxify? Because there are many foreign substance, false doctrines that had been given by such imposters among the media, and the stomach must be cleansed first before God could give new message. So, in this study, not until 2011, that is the time that God began to give new messages to His people. Although, brothers and sisters, according to the type, from 1833 to 1843, that is 10 years. Right? 10 years. It is called the midnight cry. Midnight cry. 10 years, but that is only the type. What is the outcome of that midnight cry? Disappointment. Great disappointment. But according to the great controversy, as well as in the writings of B.T. Hotep, from 2011 to 2021, but this is Bible calendar. It is also called midnight cry. But what is the result? Delay. So, the first midnight cry, they experience disappointment. The second midnight cry, they will experience delay. 2021 in Gregorian, that is 2020. Therefore, in 2020, there will be no more delay. That is the message. So we guarantee to you, brothers and sisters, that the experience of the layman's movement is found in the Bible and in the Spirit prophecy. And the Bedeans who are mocking the layman's movement, speaking evil, negative things, saying that we are false messenger, false prophet, because we set the date and it never been happen, we will agree to what they are saying that we set the date. But we of ourselves, we know by experience that such experience is found in the Bible. The first midnight cry, the outcome of setting the date is disappointment. But the second midnight cry, the outcome of the setting the date is delay. But after the delay, in 2020, why is it that God purposed delay? There are many reasons. But one of the many reasons is that it says that the scripture being inscribed in present tense, fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come, indicates that the message will not be fully understood, not until after the actual time has arrived. And secondly, it says, the Shepherd's Rod says, that is in 1 SR 156 and 157. And second, according to 2 SR 237, the scripture being inscribed in past tense, at midnight there was a cry, indicating that the final proclamation of the midnight cry is the time when there is no more delay, but there was a cry. What is cry? Message. There was a delay. So at midnight, there was a cry, by which such cry represents the delays. So, we will continue this subject, brothers and sisters, and our next episode will be focusing to you all different angles concerning 2021 and 2022. And we will prove to you that all Bible prophecies is focusing these last 2 years. So hoping that the good Lord will bless us and would help us. Thank you very much for listening. Have a beautiful, wonderful evening.